Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, and against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand any evil day, and having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints.
Hey, I'm Andrea Warnock.
I'm Nate Warnock.
And you joined us for Family Friday on the Marriage by Design podcast. And this is a time that we get to talk to you about God's design for family and how we live that out in our own family.
That's right. Super excited to be starting a series on the armor of God, found in Ephesians 6, and helping our kids to understand what that armor of God means and how they put it on, even at a young age. What does it look like to wear the armor of God?
Yeah. Right. So, the armor of God is found in verses 10 through 18 of Ephesians 6. And I'll read that here in a little bit.
You just heard it, though.
Yeah. So our son, our oldest son, Jackson, has been learning this passage for the last several months. And he's got it down pretty darn good. And it's so cool to hear that come from his mouth, because while he may not totally understand the armor of God right now and the spiritual battles that we are in throughout our whole life, that will always be there, right?
That's right.
All of these verses that we put into our hearts at any time, but especially at a young age, they're always there, and they're recalled so easily. It's amazing. And then he has that there for his whole life.
Yeah, that's right. Couple real quick tips on helping your kids memorize the Bible, so you get something immediately out the gate from us, something that we learned from the school that Jackson goes to. 2 tips. One is, you probably heard as Jackson was reciting that verse, it's kind of a sing-songy sort of cadence that he memorized it. That's created, you can create it as the parent, right? It just kind of, you take the verse and sort of put it to a rhythm so that it makes sense to the kids, right?
Yeah.
And it helps them to remember it by the cadence of the memorization. And then the second thing that we learned is...
I was going to give an example of that.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So like the verse for him would sound like, this is a different version, but like verse 15. And as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace in all circumstances. It's just whatever made sense to the person that it was a mom, I think, that put together that particular cadence for this verse.
But it really helps.
It helps so much for those long passages.
Even young children, too.
For those long passages, to really learn those. So we put Bible verses to songs or to some sort of like sing-songy kind of cadence.
Right.
It's great.
Right. And then the second thing is, if your kids, if you'd like them to memorize a longer passage, like Ephesians 6, 10 through 18, and you're going to do it over a series of maybe days or weeks, have them start at the last verse and work their way backwards.
Yeah.
Right? It won't make as much sense to your kids, like in the memorization of it. But as you talk about it, and hopefully if your kids are memorizing a passage, you're talking about it as a family. But the reason why you do that, is that what you were going to ask?
Yeah,
so tell me. So the reason why you do that is because then as your kids are reciting the verse, they're actually getting more confident with each passing verse, right? If you've ever memorized something, a poem or a Bible verse or something, one of the biggest struggles is you really know verses 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then 5 you kind of know, and 6 you sort of know, and you start getting nervous, right? If you memorize them in reverse, so 18, then 17 and 18, then 16 through 18, like that, by the time you get to 10 through 18, you might struggle a little bit on 10 and maybe a little bit on 11, but then you start
You
plugging
get more-
along and you
more-
get
more
more
confidence.
confident as you go
It's a really great way to do that when they're
Yep.
memorizing large.
It works as an adult too, I would
And
say.
I'll tell you, our son started learning large passages. So our son started learning 2 or 3 verses together at about age 4 or 5. And they can do it. They're sponges. Then at age 6, he was learning over the course of quite a bit of time, but he was learning big passages at a time.
Right.
And they can do it.
Yep. It's great.
Yeah.
That's great. So a little side tip for you if you are
Yeah.
trying to raise kids that are memorizing the Bible.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of background about the book of Ephesians. So Ephesians is in the New Testament, and it's written by Paul, who is an apostle. And a lot of the books of how many books in the New Testament are written by Paul? 16? I don't know.
I'll count them while you're speaking.
Okay, quite a few of the books in the New Testament are written by the Apostle Paul. Anyway, so Ephesians was written to the Christians in the city of Ephesus, the Ephesians, and so Paul wrote this to the believers there while he was imprisoned by the Romans. So Paul had he was a missionary for the Lord, and there was times in his life where he was imprisoned because of his being a missionary and spreading the gospel. So at the time he wrote to the Ephesians, he was imprisoned, which becomes kind of an interesting fact when we talk about the armor of God. So anything else you want to say about Ephesians?
No, I mean Ephesians is probably my favorite.
Really?
Paul's letters. There's so much in there, really deep doctrinal.
It's
just
full.
Truth.
It's totally full.
And it is definitely a book that I would encourage you to camp out in if you haven't in the past.
Okay, so I know you heard it in the beginning, but I'm going to read verses 10 through 18 because I don't have it memorized. I should, but okay. So I'm starting in, and this is ESV. I'm starting in verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authority, against the cosmic powers over the present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all to stand firm, stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness. And as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one. And take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints. And also for me, that words may be given to me. Oh, this is 19. That's okay. In opening my mouth boldly to proclaim the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in chains, that I may declare it boldly as I ought to speak. So it's a big long passage, so we're breaking this up into kind of a series. Right now we're just giving you an intro, and then we'll get into the armor of God in the following weeks.
Great.
But we wanted to just do kind of an intro to start. So the first part of it talks about be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. And I did a little bit of research on that, which I found really interesting. The strength of His might, or some versions say the power of His might.
Okay.
So like might is, think of it as muscles. It's the reserve of power. It's the ability to have power, but it's kind of the reserve there. And
okay.
Then the strength or the power is the use of that might or the use of that muscle. So benching 350 pounds would be an example of power or strength.
Right, like I was doing earlier.
Yes.
Today.
Every day, all day.
I do usually 1,000.
Right. So it says...
Why are you laughing?
No reason.
Uh-huh.
Nope, no reason at all.
Cutting that laughter out.
So it starts with finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. So where do we get this might from? Where do we get our spiritual muscles from? Well, it says from the Lord.
Right.
We're not getting it from our own self-help books or from our own within our own selves or anything. We have to get that from the Lord.
Right.
So be strong in the Lord and in the strength of His might. Put on the whole armor of God. Excuse me, we can't miss the armor. That's why we're going to go into each of these individually, because it's important that we understand really what the full armor of
Yeah,
God
you
is.
bet.
So then, we talked about power and might. So talking about that verse 10 and going into getting this power and all that.
Yeah.
One thing that I read was like, think about being in the military. Do we get some new recruit into the military and say, all right, now go fight.
Right.
Go into war, get on the front lines, go fight.
No, you get trained.
They go through basic training.
Right.
What do they learn there? Well, they learn, first of all, they're working on their strength, their might, right? There's tons of training that they're doing just for their
physical training,
right? But they're also doing a lot of learning how the military works. What are the operations? What are the ranks? Who is our enemy?
Right.
All that sort of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of training that's not just might and power sort of training, but training their minds, training to understand how they fight and who they're fighting, all that sort of thing. So,
right. Which, as you're thinking about this, Ephesians, so the town of Ephesus, the city of Ephesus, was a major military hub.
Yes.
So that's why we see in Ephesians 5, when he's talking, specifically as he's leading into talking about marriage, that word submit that he uses is a military term. He's obviously going into a considerable amount of military discussion right here, because the Ephesians were a group of people that would have understood
very much so
what that meant. Even if they were just a part of the church and not a military person themselves, the military was running training exercises and marches and had a barracks and these kinds of things in and around them. So it would have made sense to them.
Yeah, so there has to be a significant amount of training that happens before battle.
Right.
But also, they don't stop the training at any point during the military career. It's not like, oh, you've been through basic training and now we do no more. We don't expect anything more of you. It's a constant training process and a constant working those real muscles and those quote muscles,
Sure.
So think about that in respect to our kids and of course ourselves too. But we can't expect our kids to just know how to fight spiritual battles, right? Like, oh, you're a Christian or you were raised in this Christian house and now you know. So I'm just going to unleash you. They have to be trained, and we're the trainers, and we get that great responsibility.
It's a huge responsibility
to train them up, not just to say you're going to have spiritual battles and you're going to have to fight them, but really teaching them how we fight spiritual battles.
Yeah.
And to expect those too. So
right.
So we can't expect our kids to be trained up to fight well in spiritual battles. Our job is to help train them and teach them and to be strong and to teach them to be strong. And then at some point that has to become their own, that has to be something that becomes really their own responsibility.
Sure. Yeah, sure. At some point it becomes yours.
Yep.
Yeah. Or not. And that's on you.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So putting a weak man in armor and then sending him out to battle does no good for anybody. The man, the army. So think about that in regards to our kids, but again, also us too. We've got to be strong. We've got to be armored up in order to go out to battle.
Right. Right. So yeah, so in your military analogy, you get trained up before you go out. We don't just send people out.
Right.
Good.
Yep.
Good.
And then so then we'll talk about verse 12. It's talking about, for we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. So spiritual warfare is a part of the believer's life.
That's right.
Of every believer's life. And so often, I believe so often we don't even recognize that it's happening.
Tragically so, I believe.
But it's happening. And interestingly, verse 12 shows us that there's ranks of the evil forces, and I mean there's legions of them. So to think that there's one devil and that's it is wrong. He has an army of evil forces, and we have to understand that his desire is to really take down Christians, to really shoot those darts at Christians and try to hurt us. So to hurt our ministry, to hurt our witness, to hurt our what am I trying to think of? I don't know.
Yeah,
The words escaped me. But
no, you're good at it. It's great. And to carry on that military analogy, we train up our soldiers. Legacy, nice. We train up our soldiers, but then we don't just go, all right, now go kill someone, right? Or go take this position, or go protect this position. There's a clear enemy,
right?
And it just like the Lord, as He's preparing us and preparing us to prepare others, to clearly define the enemy.
Right.
The enemy we fight with is not an enemy of flesh and blood, but an enemy that's much more sinister than that.
Yeah, and so our enemy is not people.
Right.
Because our enemy is really, maybe it's the enemy,
working through someone.
Yeah, the devil or
yeah.
one of his legions that's working through somebody. But our enemy is not, it says not flesh and blood. It's not the person sitting next to you or the person who you feel like is attacking you or whatever.
Right.
We have to understand that it's against the spiritual forces that we cannot see.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's something that we have to be recognizing and teaching our kids too.
Yeah.
Who teach them who we're really fighting. And
yeah, that's right.
The Bible talks about the enemy is the father of all lies. John 8:44. He steals, kills, and destroys. John 10:10. He prowls around looking for whom he may devour or destroy. He's a thief, like Matthew 13:19. He's an accuser, Zechariah 3:1-2. He's an enemy of righteousness, full of deceit and trickery. He perverts the ways of the Lord, Acts 13:10.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all characteristics of the evil one, and we need to recognize every time we see those. It's not man, it's the enemy, our spiritual enemy.
That's exactly right, and we need to help our kids understand that too. Right. I mean, everything we're doing in this kind of kickoff to this series certainly applies to us as adults, but it applies all the more as we have to recognize these things and then be able to share them with our kids at a child level. Right? You have this armor, and the cool thing about the armor of God, particularly if you have boys, this is something that they're going to think's pretty cool. Right? That God's given us this armor to put on, and He's given you a sword, and they'll think it's less cool when you explain to them what each of those pieces of armor are, but they'll get it, right? And they can relate to that. That analogy. Yeah,
and a way that we can really help them with seeing the unseen enemy is in situations that come up for them. A bully at school. It's not. We had an issue with that with Jackson years ago. A kid who was bullying him, and of course that was really hurting him, and we recognized that, and we were sad about that with him and talked that through with him and all that sort of thing. But we also prayed for that kid too.
Right.
And we said, this is the enemy that's playing a role here. And so let's call that out what it is.
Yep.
And pray for this child and rebuke the enemy. And I think that really helps too with our kids seeing people for who God sees them and not for maybe the way that they're acting.
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, so then verse 13 goes into taking up the whole armor of God. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all to stand firm. So, taking up the whole armor of God is a choice. It doesn't just happen. We're not just magically suited up, right?
Interesting.
Like, we don't military, go back to the military example. We don't give people armor and just they press a button and it's just on them all the time. They have to make the choice to
suit up,
wear their gear that they wear, have the weapons that they carry, all that sort of thing. It doesn't just happen upon them. So same as believers and same as our children, we have to choose to take up the armor of God. And it says take up the whole armor of God.
But maybe if I just want to avoid all that conflict and you just not put it on.
You're out in battle. Do you want to be naked in battle, or do you want to be geared up?
Right, that's true though, but I think people kind of think that.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, the point is that the battle is an inevitability.
Totally.
That's going to happen.
Yeah, it doesn't say it only happens if you're suited up.
Right, but I mean, I think some believers can fall into this like, hey, I'm going to go to church and I'm going to have some Christian friends and then I'm going to go home and that's all I'm going to do.
Right.
And so that can become a license for spiritual laziness, which is really what that amounts to if we're not getting suited up. And the problem is the battle's happening. It's happening around you, in your home, between those friends, in your kids' lives. It doesn't matter if you put your kids in a Christian bubble or not in a Christian bubble. It's gonna happen. So we can either help our kids get suited up or we can send them into battle unprepared. Those are really the only two choices.
Right. Yeah, and it says so many times in this passage to, what does it say? To run?
Stand firm.
Stand firm. When you're in battle, don't retreat. Don't give in. Don't kneel down saying, don't wave your white flag. It says to stand firm. Yeah. And how do we stand firm? Well, because we're on the victor's side.
Right.
We're in God's army. And even all the flaming darts of the evil one that come our way, we can still stand firm because we choose to put on the armor of God.
Right.
And we know that can't destroy us.
Right. That's right.
The enemy's tactics can never destroy our soul. And I think that's something really important to tell our kids. You may go through some really hard times in life, but this life here is temporary, and nothing can take your soul, which belongs to the Lord. If you belong to the Lord, that's it.
Right.
The enemy cannot do anything with that. So
right.
Helping our kids to understand that God has a mission for each person, and that the enemy is intent on knocking us off of course. Right. And that may not be the enemy is going to battle you out so that you can't complete your mission. No, yes, sometimes, but he may just want to get you off course and you get distracted from that mission. And we have to remember that that's his goal, and we have to stay on course. We have to stand firm with the Lord.
Yeah.
It's not, and this isn't a one-time battle. It's lifelong. We're not going to have some one-time big war with the enemy and then that's it. I've stood firm. I've accomplished the battle. I'm done. No, you have to keep on that armor, keep vigilant, and understand the enemy is always around, and know that you're probably going to have another battle.
It's part of how we help our kids understand too, because it's way easier to start putting on the armor of God if you make a habit of it when you're a child than if you try and wait to start doing that as an adult.
Yep.
And that'll make more sense as we get into each individual piece of the armor of God over the coming weeks.
Yep. So a little bit about standing. David Guzik had some really great things to say about standing. So this passage says so many times stand firm, stand therefore, so many times. So it's important. And David Guzik had several things that I'll just read here. We stand in grace, Romans 5:2. We stand in the gospel, 1 Corinthians 15:1. We stand in courage and strength, 1 Corinthians 16:13. We stand in faith, 2 Corinthians 1:24. We stand in Christian liberty, Galatians 5:1. We stand in Christian unity, Philippians 1:27. We stand in the Lord, Philippians 4:1. And we should stand perfect and complete in the will of God, Colossians 4:12. I love those. That's what we're standing on. We're standing in the Lord's army. We're standing with fellow believers. We're standing in the gospel and with courage, with liberty, unity, all that sort of thing. We're not standing on our own.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. There's a lot being made right now in our modern age of people who don't have a faith, right? Atheists or whatever.
Right.
But it's so true what's been said that everyone has faith in something. Mm-hmm. What we're saying is that our faith is based in grace, the gospel, courage and strength, faith, liberty, unity, the Lord, and our faith is perfect and complete.
Yep.
Right? We're going to have faith in something. The question is, are we going to have faith in the promises of God as laid out in the Bible? Or are we going to try and have our faith in something else? And tragically, if we put our faith in something else, that something else is going to fail you at some point.
Right. Yeah, and it's going to knock you down.
Right.
Too, when you're in the battle. So.
Right.
So we wanted to give you an idea of what these first few verses looked like.
Yeah.
So that you can better explain to your kids, better understand it yourself, and have a better understanding that spiritual battle is part of the Christian life. And and that's because we live in a fallen world, and the enemy is allowed to prowl around.
Yep.
Seeking that whom he may devour. But we will never be overcome, because the Lord has made us overcomers. So we are his children, and the enemy can't destroy us.
That's right.
So the last two things, we must not be frightened, because fear is not of the Lord. Fear is we are not given a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't be frightened in battle. We have the victor on our sides.
Shaking in your boots and standing firm are not compatible with each other.
Right.
It's good.
And always be alert.
Yeah. And be vigilant. I mean, that's part of that. Be alert, be vigilant.
Yeah. So help your kids.
That's right.
Help your kids to be alert by understanding this is a battle we face. This is a battle that we will come into frequently.
Yep.
Spiritual battle. So let's stand. Let's learn how to become mighty and use that might in power. And we do that by, reading the Word of God, hiding His Word in our heart, by putting on the armor of God, studying. Sorry, I have paint on my hands. Studying the Word of God, not just reading it, but studying it, digging deep into it, being thankful in all circumstances. These are all ways that we are alert, that we are always becoming ready for battle.
That's right. So over the next few weeks, we're going to take each of the pieces of armor individually. Is that right?
Yep.
Perfect. And we'll try and do it in a way where you could watch or listen to these episodes with your kids. And it would make sense to them, and they can kind of get a feel for what Paul was talking about when he was talking about each of these pieces of armor, and certainly, hopefully start the discussion, the dialogue between you and your kids and you and your spouse with regards to what does this look like in our family, what does this look like in our lives, and what does it look like in the lives of our kids.
Yep. Thanks so much for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of that.
Yeah, so.
And then remember to join us Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Central, and that will be for Sunday Night Live.
Yeah.
And just like to talk a little bit.
Do some Q&A, hang out a little bit.
Yep. And then back again on Monday with Marriage Monday.
That's right. Guys, thank you so much for joining us for Family Friday. And remember, God is for your family. Have a great weekend.
Hey, thanks for joining us on Marriage by Design. If you were impacted by this video, like it by hitting the thumbs up below. Also, don't forget to subscribe, and once you subscribe, hit the bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes release.
Excellent. Also, one of the huge pillars of our show is interactivity between us and you. So we would love you to comment down in the comments below if you have thoughts about this video, or if you have questions or other things you'd like to see considered in the future. In addition, if you'd like, you can email us. That's marriagebydesignpodcast@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram @marriagebydesignpodcast, or you can find us on Facebook by searching Marriage by Design Podcast. Finally, if you want to, you can tweet at us. We do have a Twitter account that is @MarriageXDesign. Thanks, and have a great day.